Welcome to tonight's journey. A journey that doesn't require a passport, a suitcase, or even shoes, just your imagination. Close your eyes, or leave them half open if you'd like, and let your mind do the traveling. We're going far back in time. So far that countries didn't exist. So far that no one had written anything down yet. So far that waking up on time meant the birds started singing or your stomach simply refused to sleep in. Welcome to the Paleolithic era, time without phones, without toothpaste, without Wi-Fi. And yet, people had something we often forget. They lived slowly, they lived closely, they lived fully. Our ancient ancestors, those who slept in caves, hunted animals, and gathered roots. They weren't the clumsy, grunting figures we often imagine from cartoons or textbooks. They weren't just dirty silhouettes yelling at fire. They knew how to love. They knew how to mourn. They knew how to tell stories, make music, raise children, and create art. They were human, just like you and me. The only difference? They didn't have supermarkets, and of course, had never tasted coffee. So tonight, let me take you into their world. Not through a lecture, but through a story. It's a single, quiet day in the life of a Paleolithic human. From the first breath of dawn to the laughter around the firelight. There's no alarm clock, no phone buzzing on the nightstand, no shrill ringtone or glowing screen yanking you out of sleep. You wake up the oldest way humans ever have. With light, the faint smell of last night's fire still smoldering, with the chill creeping in under your rough animal hide blanket, or maybe more abruptly with someone next to you coughing loudly, from breathing smoke all night long. The bed is not comfortable. Just a hard stretch of earth beneath you. A few handfuls of straw mixed with dust, bits of bark, and the occasional crawling thing. There's no pillow, no mattress. Just your own curled-up body holding on to warmth like it's treasure. You don't sleep alone. Inside a small shelter, or the mouth of a cave, everyone lies close together, shoulder to shoulder, skin to skin, fighting the cold as a group. Children are tucked safely between their parents. Elders sleep closest to the fire, because the nights are harder on their bones. Privacy is a luxury you've never known. You share everything: the breath of others, the rhythm of their snores, the groans of their dreams, and the rustle of movement in the dark. When you open your eyes, there's no checking messages. Instead, you check the fire. Is it still glowing? Did someone tend to it during the night? The fire is life. It's warmth. It's protection. If it's gone out, reigniting, it isn't simple. Not everyone can do it. You need dry tinder, flint stones, patience, and luck. If you were the one assigned to guard it and you let it go out, prepare for sharp words, maybe even hunger. Breakfast might be withheld in silent punishment. You sit up slowly, peeling yourself away from the cold layers of fur. Your back aches, your feet are numb, your hair smells like smoke, your breath comes heavy from the cold morning air. But you're alive? No predator came in the night, no rocks fell, no one died from spoiled food. You made it to another day. And that means the sun is rising on another day of survival. Once the fire is checked and your fingers start to remember what warmth feels like, it's time to move on to the next quiet ritual of survival. Checking your weapons and tools, not for display, not for collecting, not because they look impressive leaning against a cave wall, but because your life and the lives of those around you depend on their edges, their points, and their strength. A flint knife, a spear tip made of bone, a handle bound tightly with sinew pulled from the leg of an animal. Each tool is handmade, not mass-produced, not replaceable. You pick them up one by one, holding them to the flickering firelight, turning them slowly. If a knife edge feels dull, you sharpen it. If a spear point is cracked, you bind another to the shaft. You start from scratch. Some members of the group are better at this than others. They know how to strike stone at just the right angle. They shape edges that last longer, bite cleaner, stay sharper. They are not the strongest, not the fastest, but they are respected. They trade their skill for food, for warmth, sometimes even for protection, because a good tool can feed a family, and a bad one can end a life. These aren't just objects. They're extensions of your own hands. Your knife is how you cut meat. Your scraper makes clothing. Your spear stands between you and a charging animal. Sometimes the effort is wasted. You might spend 2 hours shaping a perfect blade only to have it snap the first time it touches bone. You don't scream. You don't give up. You lower your eyes. Pick up another stone and begin again. That's how early humans survived, not with power, with patience. No toast, no melting cheese. No steaming cup of coffee to wake you gently with its smell. Welcome to Paleolithic breakfast, where the most luxurious item on the menu is a scrap of dried meat left from the night before. If it hasn't been stolen by a curious forest rat during the night, you check the skewer by the fire, empty. So now it's time to go looking. No fridge, no grocery store, no menu. Just you, nature, and eyes, still half closed from a bad night's sleep. You start with observation. Any berries left on the bush? Any edible roots poking through the dirt? Is that an ant trail leading to something promising? If you're lucky, maybe you find termites, a damp mushroom glistening with morning dew, or an abandoned bee's nest with a smear of honey left inside. No one is picky. No one asks, "What's for breakfast?" Breakfast is anything that isn't too hard, too poisonous, or too fast. Children are usually the first ones to feel hunger. They wander around the campsite with sticks in hand, eyes scanning for bugs, voices constantly asking, "Can I eat this?" You say, "No," but not always fast enough. And then a stomach ache becomes a harsh but memorable lesson. Breakfast isn't a ritual. It's the first mini-hunt of the day. A warm-up round before hours of chasing food, dodging danger, and trying to stay alive. And it's not quiet. There's the crunch of chewing, the rustle of leaves, a yelp when someone steps on a thorn, and laughter when a child squeals as ants crawl up their legs. If you eat well, you're lucky. If not, well, you wait until lunch. And in the Stone Age, lunch might be 3 days from now. A hunt doesn't begin with shouting. It begins with silence. Thick, heavy quiet where every breath is held and every step is calculated. You don't hunt alone. In the Paleolithic world, hunting was a team effort. Like a survival symphony, each person playing their part. Scouts went ahead, leaving simple hand signals on rocks. The spear holders followed, eyes scanning every broken twig. The loudest person often left behind, either as bait or to yell "run." At the perfect moment. Strategy wasn't just chasing and hoping. It was ancestral intelligence in motion. Create noise on the left, push the animal toward the cliff on the right. Use fire, smoke, even howls to corral a herd into traps. Now build hidden pits, cover them with leaves and wait. Big prey was treasure. A bison meant meat for days. A deer meant warmth, tools, clothing. But it came at a cost. Sometimes you chased an animal through the woods and slipped. Sometimes you threw your spear and missed. Sometimes you returned to camp covered in mud, clothes torn, proudly declaring, "Yeah, the wind shifted. We're understood." Hunting wasn't just about strength. It was timing, skill, and sometimes not sneezing during the ambush. The one who landed the kill didn't have to brag. They just showed up early, carrying the prize, and earned the warmest seat by the fire that night. Hunting was brutal, exhausting, and risky, but it was also bonding. It taught you teamwork, trust, and never to shout left when you meant right. There were no cheers. No dramatic chases through the forest like the hunters, but it was the quiet footsteps between trees, the careful hands picking leaves, that truly kept the tribe alive. Foragers were often women, elders, and children, the ones who didn't carry spears, but carried generations of knowledge instead. They knew the land like a memory, which tree roots hid edible tubers, which bushes bore ripe berries in which season, which mushrooms made you see. Pink talking bears. This wasn't guesswork. One mistake could poison the whole camp. So knowledge was passed down through stories, careful observation, and the occasional never-forget group stomachache. Foraging wasn't just about food. It collected dry wood, medicinal herbs, bark, roots. A single branch might be a healing rub. A flower petal might stop bleeding out. Children often tagged along, learning the land, and occasionally putting random things in their mouths. You had to forage, teach, and make sure no one hugged a beehive. The work was quiet but vital. When the hunters came back empty-handed, it was the gatherers who saved dinner. They didn't boast. They didn't need praise. They just glanced at the pot over the fire and knew, because of them, no one would sleep hungry tonight. Tending the fire wasn't glamorous. No applause, no glory. No one cheered for the firekeeper. But if you let it go out, the entire camp would remember your name. All winter long. Fire was the heart of Paleolithic life. Without it, there was no light, no warmth, no cooked food, and nothing to keep the hungry creatures in the dark at bay. So keeping the fire alive wasn't just a chore. It was the line between survival and disaster. The job often went to someone young, new, or someone who'd accidentally burned the chief's cloak the day before. You sat next to the embers, watching them like a hawk. Feeding logs, shielding from wind, pushing aside ash. Falling asleep, not an option. If the fire died, you'd hear the words, "Then you're the one making sparks tonight." Starting a new fire wasn't easy. No matches, no lighters. Just 2 sticks, a bundle of dry grass, and a whole lot of patience. You might rub your hands raw just to get a single ember. That's why many tribes carried fire with them when moving camp. Glowing embers were wrapped in dry moss, tucked into leather pouches or bark bundles. One person would carry it like a sacred flame, because really that's what it was. Nobody praised the firekeeper, but let the flame die once, and you'd never stop hearing about it. And that night, when everyone sat close to the warmth, food crackling over the flames, the firekeeper stayed quiet, eyes on the coals, no celebration. But everyone was alive because of them. Not every prehistoric human lived in a cave. Caves were great, sturdy, warm, already roofed, but they weren't always available. Sometimes you arrived and found out a bear had gotten there first. So, many Paleolithic people built their own homes, not mansions, just shelters. Patched together with branches, animal bones, hides, dry leaves, and packed mud. The frame was made from thick sticks or the rib bones of giant animals, sometimes mammoths. These were tied together using sinew ropes or tough vines. The walls were covered with hides, moss, mud, or anything that could block the wind. The house was not pretty. It didn't smell good, but it kept you dry. And on a stormy night, that's all that mattered. If the roof collapsed, rebuild it. If the wind tore the hides away, weighed them down with stones. If the water started dripping onto your bedding, move to another corner. Paleolithic architecture had no blueprints. Only trial and error, determination, and the will to survive. Every rebuild taught something new. Keep the fire in the center. Leave a hole in the roof for smoke. Find the least windy spot. Dig your poles deep if winter was coming. Furniture, maybe just a flat stone. A pile of animal skins to sleep on. A basket to hold food. That was enough. The house didn't need to be luxurious. It just needed to get you through the night. If you woke up dry, with the roof still overhead, it was a good day. There were no parenting manuals. No podcasts about baby sleep. Definitely no YouTube videos titled 10 Tricks to Raise a Calm Caveman. In the Paleolithic world, parenting was pure instinct, exhausting and non-stop. Children were born into the wild, in the cold, the hunger, and sometimes the distant howling of wolves. If they and their mothers survived childbirth, the real challenge began. Keeping that tiny, squirming human alive. There were no diapers. Babies were wrapped in animal hides or plant fibers, and you quickly learned not to lay them on damp moss. Breastfeeding lasted not for months, but sometimes for years. Mother's milk was the safest, and often only nutrition. As kids grew, they learned by watching, listening, and copying. There were no classrooms. Just the flickering fire at the center of camp and the endless tasks of daily life. You didn't gently say, "Don't play with fire," you shouted. "Take your hand out before IT burns off." You didn't explain the danger of cliffs with a diagram. You grabbed your child before they tumbled and hoped the lesson stuck. The toys, there were none. Just sticks, stones, feathers, and imagination. Children played with mud, bugs, and whatever they could grab or occasionally lick. A child who loved throwing rocks might one day become a skilled hunter. One who quietly watched the elders might grow into a shaman or a leader. By age 10, kids were already part of the tribe's engine. They helped gather, watched the fire, chased birds away from drying meat, and learned survival, piece by piece. No one asked them, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Because the only answer was, alive. As the last light dipped below the horizon, the the first sparks of the fire rose. The flames didn't just offer warmth, they were the heart of the tribe. People gathered close, shoulders touching. Someone turned a skewer of meat. Someone else fed dry branches to the fire. Children yawned and curled up on hides. And then the stories began. There were no books, no paper or pens. Just voices, memories, and sparks dancing in the dark. Tales of hunts gone wrong, of narrow escapes, of dreams where ancestors whispered advice. The storyteller wasn't just someone who spoke. They were the one who had seen, felt, survived. The fire was a theater, where every story was a performance lit by flame. The fire was a school, where children learned about the world long before they could spell it. The fire was the birthplace of culture, where people remembered, shared, laughed, and truly belonged. Maybe you had narrowly avoided a charging boar earlier that day. Maybe your stomach was still empty. But around the fire, you were never alone. Once the essentials of survival were handled, the fire was lit, meat was roasted, children fast asleep. Humans began to paint, not for survival, but to remember something. On cold stone walls, deep inside caves no one lived in, the first images emerged. Horses, bison, deer, woolly mammoths, not standing still, but moving, running, alive, across time. There were no paintbrushes, just fingers, broken sticks, and hollow bones for blowing pigment. Colors made from charcoal, red ochre, crushed minerals, mixed with water, fat, or even spit. Why did they paint? No one really knows. Maybe it was a ritual for good luck before a hunt. Maybe a way to teach children about the animals, what to follow, what to avoid. Or maybe because humans simply can't exist without creating something beautiful. Somewhere on the wall is a tiny handprint. Perhaps from a child. Perhaps the first time a human said, "I was here. I existed." Long after the fire has faded, the shelters collapsed, and the bones turned to dust, those paintings remain, not just as art, but as the first memory of humanity. No doctors, no hospitals, no antibiotics, no thermometers. If you got sick, if you got hurt, if you stepped on a thorn, you were playing a game of chance, with life itself. But early humans were not helpless. They observed, they remembered, experimented, and sometimes they understood. Willow bark could bring down a fever. Wild leaves were pressed to wounds. Honey, not just sweet, but powerfully antibacterial. When someone broke a bone, they weren't left behind. The limb was set with wooden splints and leather ties. That person was given rest, because the group knew. Keeping one person alive meant keeping the group strong. There were those who knew more than others, about plants, bites, stomach pain, or strange dreams. They weren't doctors, but they were trusted. Sometimes they whispered to the wind. Sometimes they sang, scattered ashes on wounds, or used smoke to chase away bad spirits. It was a mixture of medicine, mystery, and hope. Death was familiar, but giving up was not. No maps, no Google directions, no signs saying turn left in 300 meters. Movement was instinct, and also a survival strategy. Early humans didn't stay put for long. They followed the herds, the seasons, the rivers, or simply left when the old camp started to smell too bad. Every journey was a gamble. You didn't know what lay ahead. You only knew staying might mean not surviving. The whole group moved together. The strong carried the supplies. The weak walked slower, but they weren't left behind. They brought everything that mattered. Tools, animal hides, glowing coal wrapped in moss, fire carried like treasure. And the children slung on backs or gripping a parent's hand. There were no wheels, only calloused feet and sheer determination. They walked through forests, forded rivers, crossed windswept plains. At night, they built fires, pitched shelters, and looked up at the stars, finding their way from the Milky Way with no compass needed. Not every journey ended in triumph. Sometimes they found only dry ground and a few bitter berries. But sometimes, after days of exhaustion, they stumbled upon a quiet paradise. Clean water, gentle sun, abundant game. And there they paused, until it was time to move again. when bellies were full, when the fire crackled warmly. When night wrapped the cave walls in shadow, humans did the strangest thing any creature could do. They created. They didn't paint to display, not to sell, not to post online. They painted because the mind needed to tell a story. On cold stone walls, the images began to appear. Horses, deer, bison, lines that moved, tiny handprints. Sometimes symbols, ones we still can't fully understand. What did they use to paint? Ash, red ochre, charcoal, a bit of animal fat, or fingers, sticks, or hollow bones to spray pigment. No light bulbs, no sketch pads, just flickering firelight and a soul trying to speak about the world. Maybe it was a wish for a successful hunt, maybe a ritual, maybe just a memory. I was here. And the strange, beautiful thing is, we can still see those drawings. After 30,000 years, the bison still run across the cave walls, and they tell us that humans, even when poor, afraid, and hungry, have always needed to tell stories. No hospitals, no antibiotics, no advice to drink water and get rest. If you got injured, you had to survive it. If you got sick, the group could only hope you recovered. A deep cut could become a death sentence. A bad tooth could steal your sleep for weeks. A fever came without warning and left on its own terms or not at all. And yet they lived. Not because of medicine, but through observation, instinct, and resilience. They chewed willow bark to ease pain, not knowing it carried the chemical in modern aspirin. They used roots, leaves, ashes, and tree resin to cover wounds. No antiseptics, just hope and patience. The weak were helped if the group had the strength. The disabled could still survive, because community meant no one was truly alone, and sometimes it was just luck. You recovered and walked again, or you didn't. And when night fell again, there was one more empty spot by the fire. No permanent home, no address, just the horizon, the wind, and weary footsteps. When the fire dimmed, the wild game vanished, or the water ran dry. The tribe packed up their lives, lifted their children onto their backs, and set out again. No wheels, no maps, only memory, the sky, and old trails. They crossed valleys, forded rivers, climbed hills, all in search of food and survival. Every journey was a gamble. Would there be water ahead? Herds of animals, a place to shelter? Everything came with them. Tools, hides, embers wrapped in moss, and stories whispered across generations. Children followed their parents, small feet but strong hearts, and when they arrived, they built again. A new cycle began, until it was time to leave once more. That was the Paleolithic life, belonging nowhere but living everywhere.